Your son's wife being a recluse is shameful. Get out. Ignoring her own freeloading presence in our home, my mother-in-law Emily calls me unemployed. She just eats and sleeps all day. She's the real unemployed one. Who should leave? Just wait and see. I'll break her spirit. My name is Shirley. Recently, I suddenly got hooked on cookies, and while watching TV and munching away, my waist started looking like I was wearing a floa tie. I'm 39 years old. I've been taking in too many calories without moving much. This happened about 2 years ago. Finally, my workplace introduced remote work. Normally, I'd be like, "Yay! I can sleep in since I don't have to commute." I would be so happy, but hey, how long are you going to stay home? Shouldn't you be getting ready to go to work by now? It was my mother-in-law Emily, who lives with us, scolding me as I enjoyed my extra time from not having to commute with a nice coffee. Oops, I misspoke. Strictly speaking, she doesn't live with us, she's a freeloading intruder. About a year after my husband Ryan and I stopped visiting the in-laws' house due to a widespread infection, Emily suddenly showed up at our home with a large suitcase. Is Ryan doing well? I want to play with my grandchild, so I'm moving in starting today. What? Of course, both my husband Ryan and I were against it. We have a 5-year-old daughter, Carol, and we stopped visiting to protect her from the infection. We didn't like Emily coming from their house in a more populated area to our home, and George, my father-in-law, was left behind at their house. I felt sorry for him, and living with Emily seemed like a hassle. There was no benefit, so I wanted her to leave. I tried to gently tell Emily that we didn't want her to stay, but either I was too gentle, or Emily had no intention of listening to us from the start. She didn't get it at all. No matter how many times we told her to go home. She'd accuse us of being cold-hearted or say young people these days don't respect their parents. Eventually, she managed to stay by giving us lectures. Is it because we're too weak that she barged in? No, there are people out there who simply don't listen and are very pushy. On the first day Emily barged in, we had a huge fight, and instead of leaving, she tried to barricade herself on the second floor of our house. When I stood in her way, she made such a scene that Carol was frightened and cried loudly. It was a mess. My husband and I, exhausted from work and child-rearing, didn't have the energy to fight off such a monster. That's how we ended up living with this demanding mother-in-law. Watching me drink coffee, Emily glared and said, "Didn't I tell you yesterday that I'm working remotely now?" I thought to myself as I tried to explain my new work arrangement to her again. We switched to remote work because an infection was spreading in the office, making it impossible to work. So, I don't have to go to the office. Don't lie. You can't work from home, she said arrogantly. Remote work is becoming more common, you know? My company was actually late in adopting it. Haven't you seen the news about how remote work is reducing train usage and other related information? I know that. But you work for a construction company, right? How can you work in civil engineering from home? I'm in administration, so as long as I have a computer, I can communicate with the office. Oh, sure, whatever. Don't underestimate your elders. You probably think we are not tech-savvy, but the baby boomer generation and even older are quite tech-savvy. I know there aren't such convenient jobs. Here we go again. No matter how much I tell the truth, Emily, who believes she's always right, won't listen. She's a master at justifying herself and ultimately wears us down with her lectures. Not wanting to be worn out before work, I listened to Emily's lecture with a face that said, "You're absolutely right." But the problem didn't go away. As expected, Emily gradually started calling me unemployed as I continued my remote work day after day. Ryan works outside, but you just play on the computer at home. If you have time to play on the computer, you should be doing housework. She hurled terrible words at me. By the way, I did all the housework too. I prepared her breakfast, cleaned the house, did the shopping, everything. Oh, and Ryan helped out too. Rather, Emily, who just ate the meals I prepared and lounged around all day, was the real unemployed person living off others. Ignoring her own situation, she said whatever she wanted. Day after day, I complained to Ryan about being called unemployed, and Ryan, in turn, kept asking Emily to return to George, practically begging. One day, while I was holed up in my room having an online meeting with my bosses, Emily suddenly burst in. "Hey! There's no more cookies!" I was stunned by her red-faced yelling and was taken aback. But she didn't care and loudly ordered me to go buy some more. I quickly turned off my meeting microphone and told Emily, "I'm in a meeting. I'm in a meeting. You're just pretending to work while playing around." "What meeting? You're just a shut-in. There's no snacks. Stop complaining and go buy some. And I wanted rice for breakfast today, but you served bread for 2 days in a row. How can you be so thoughtless? You're really stupid." She should do these things herself. She's freeloading and not even contributing to living expenses. To be honest, the house is under my name, and I pay a $1.8 thousand mortgage every month. Right after we decided to buy a house, Ryan was forced to transfer to a faraway branch, and when he refused, they demoted him, so he decided to quit. At that time, I was working for a larger construction company than I am now and had financial stability, so I took out the mortgage under my name. Now Ryan covers the living expenses, and we split everything else equally as a couple. How could I possibly be what she calls unemployed? That day, she kept pestering me to go buy cookies, and when she got too insistent, I shut her out of the room. Emily got so mad she pounded on the door repeatedly. I went back to the meeting, but I couldn't concentrate, and the day's work was a disaster. When I told Ryan about it, he, who usually chose his words carefully around Carol, uncharacteristically shouted at Emily, "Enough is enough!" He had reached his limit with this living arrangement too. Emily, while not doting, had always had a soft spot for her only son, Ryan. Usually, she takes a "I'm the parent" stance and is strong-willed, but when Ryan gets genuinely angry, she becomes weak. If Ryan could control his anger and be serious, maybe Emily would have left our house. But Ryan is gentle by nature, so it's not usually his way. When he forcibly grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door, Emily finally calmed down a bit. "Oh, did you think we actually kicked her out?" Ryan managed to push her outside, but Emily threw a fit and forced her way back inside. Both Ryan and I resisted letting her back in, and ended up with several bruises on our arms and legs. It seemed she had no intention of moving. She hates being told what to do, so even if we tried to kick her out, she'd just come back. If only we could break her spirit. But we had no idea how to handle such a monster. After a period of relative calm, Emily suddenly said one day, "I met a neighbor on my walk today. They said their wife also works remotely but still goes to the office sometimes." "So, your story is a lie." "What?" She walked in while I was working, looking smug as if to say, "See, I was right." I couldn't help but pause my work. "I knew something was off with you being home every day." What are you talking about? I'm in the middle of work right now." "Stop with the lies." "I heard from the neighbors that not every remote worker is home every day. They go to the office sometimes." "Well, that depends on the company's policy. Mine allows full remote work, so I choose to stay home because of Carol." Trying to cover up your lie now is just childish. No, really, it depends on the company. I'm so embarrassed for you. When I told the neighbors that my son's wife never leaves the house, they were shocked at your remote work setup. How embarrassing. They were probably just surprised by the variety of work styles. But to Emily, it sounded like, there's no way such remote work exists. Your son's wife must be a recluse. She wore a triumphant grin, laughing loudly. Emily's gloating continued, so I gently said, "Excuse me, I need to focus on my work." I asked her politely to leave, but it was futile. If you're just playing around, you should listen to people. I'm saying this for your own good. She got even angrier. Trying to be courteous to avoid escalation was pointless. What should I have done? But I really needed to prioritize my work. I was urgently building a program for work, and I was close to finishing. I had no time for Emily's antics. The reason for this cohabitation is your fault for not visiting us. Are you reflecting on that? Emily's irrational scolding intensified. She finally grabbed my laptop, turned it off, and said, "Listen when people talk to you." Despite frequent saves, I lost about an hour's worth of work. Damn it. An unemployed wife is a disgrace. You're just a moocher. Get out. Emily threw my laptop at me. Luckily, it didn't hit me, but the screen was cracked. It was my personal laptop, not a company one, but still. Why do I have to be called unemployed by Emily, who barged in uninvited, disrupted my work, and made me buy a new laptop? Why does she get to live here without doing any chores or paying rent, while I handle everything? The anger simmered within me. Is this what it means to have an outburst of anger? Something snapped inside me. From that day on, I stopped arguing with her. Without a laptop, I had to go to the office, and this reduced contact with Emily, making it somewhat bearable. Finally decided to work, huh? And other sarcastic comments came my way. But I just nodded and said, "Yes, yes," letting them roll off my back. When I told him what happened, he was furious and determined to kick Emily out. But by this point, a simple eviction wouldn't satisfy my anger. Fortunately, Emily had an upcoming trip with old friends. During her absence, I planned revenge. A week later, Emily's voice rang from the front door. "I'm back!" She returned from her trip in high spirits and went upstairs. "Oh, what? What's going on?" Emily rattled the doorknob frantically. "Welcome back, Emily." "Why are you in my room?" "Since I'm unemployed, I thought I'd hole up in your room." "What?" "Yes, I took over Emily's room after she left for her trip." "Stop joking and open the door. You're ruining my good mood from the trip. Get out of my room." "Why should I? This is my house." "What?" "I own this house." "Emily, you never had a room here." "Don't give me that. I've been using it for years, so it's my room." "We never agreed to live with you. We've tried to kick you out multiple times. Your current situation is more like trespassing." "Oh, come on. Just come out of there." "No." Emily, enraged by my refusal, began kicking the door, but I didn't budge. "Granny, you shouldn't break things." I heard Carol's innocent voice from the other side of the door. It seemed Ryan was there too, as I heard him say, "Don't become like Granny, okay?" "Why am I being treated like a joke?" Emily's anger intensified. "This is it, Mom. You can leave now, leave thoughtfully, or leave and never come back. Choose one of the three." "There's no choice but to leave." She screamed in rage, but Carol added, Get out." whether she understood the situation or not. The words from her granddaughter seemed to affect Emily, who weakly said, "What is this? I've done so much for you. We've been more than patient and accommodating because you're our parent, but you've trampled on all of that." Ryan replied, "How dare you? You never visit us. With the infection spreading, we couldn't. You only think about yourself, Mom." His logical retort left Emily shouting, "I'm not wrong." "All right, this isn't going anywhere." "Okay, Emily, I'll open the door for you." "What?" Sensing something off in my tone. She was visibly suspicious and hesitant. Without waiting for her response, I opened the door. That moment, Emily froze as she took in the sight of the room. "No! Where is he? Where is Jean?" "I threw it out with the trash the day before yesterday." "How could you do that?" "I'll get you for this." Emily, half crazed, lunged at me, but I deftly sidestepped her. Jean was Emily's favorite handsome Korean idol. This trip had been organized with her friends who were also Jean fans, staying at a hotel where Jean had discreetly stayed. Every time he visited the US, she attended his events, buying special edition CDs and limited merchandise. When she first arrived at our house from the in-laws' place, 80% of her suitcase was filled with Jean merchandise. The moment she moved in, her room's walls were plastered with his posters, and framed photos lined the shelves. But now, "Why is everything Johnny Cash?" Emily's half-crying voice echoed as she realized that all her beloved Jean posters and merchandise had been replaced with Johnny Cash memorabilia. "I sold them at auction," I replied. "That's not the point!" Emily screamed. "Oh my God! Even the curtains are different!" "I thought those girly pink lace curtains didn't suit your lack of charm, so I switched them to an American traditional pattern." "What about my bear rug? Why is it Mount St. Helens now? And my Mickey Mouse plushies, what is this? Swamp Thing?" "Just trying to coordinate more age-appropriately." "What? Wait. Did you really throw out all of my Jean stuff?" Emily's face turned pale as she shook my shoulders. "As you can see," I said with a smile. Emily looked around, staring at the walls, her mouth agape, and then collapsed to her knees. She was evidently in deep shock. More than I had anticipated. "Look at this, Emily. Those Johnny Cash posters cost me about $30 each, including shipping. Cheap? Maybe. But how many do you see? I even laid them out on the floor where you can't see them. And this Mount St. Helens rug, it's hand-woven. How much do you think that cost? Plus, I paid an absurd amount on a flea market app for that Swamp Thing plushie. The price was ridiculous." Emily asked, "What are you trying to say?" "Well, if I were really unemployed, I wouldn't have the money to buy all this. It shows that I earn enough to pull off this prank." "So what? I don't care anymore." Crushed by the loss of Jean, Emily couldn't even argue. "If you go silent on me, it's not as fun. How about this, then?" "What?" Emily froze again as I quietly opened the closet. "My clothes? From now on, you only get this stylish tracksuit and a single t-shirt." I showed her a tracksuit with an American traditional pattern and a white t-shirt that simply said unemployed. "What is this? I have a Jean event next week. I can't dress up for it. Why not wear the tracksuit? It's stylish, probably. Maybe. Hopefully. If you don't like it, leave now. Get out! Get out!" Ryan and Carol echoed my sentiment. Emily, overwhelmed by the series of shocks, began to cry. "I've had enough of this house." With that, Emily grabbed the suitcase she had taken on her trip and left our home. The eviction plan was a complete success. I had thought Jean was the key to breaking her spirit, and it worked even better than I'd expected. Later, I contacted the in-laws' house and said, "If you want the Jean merchandise back, you'll have to pay for the living expenses and the laptop." Did I actually throw out the Jean stuff? Of course not. Even with family, that would be criminal. I had only pretended to discard it to break her spirit. In reality, all of Emily's belongings were hidden in Ryan's room. Relieved, Emily immediately agreed to my terms. "For Jin's sake," she said, and transferred the money for the living expenses and the new laptop into my bank account. However, it turned out that the money came from George's retirement savings. Money that had been saved for emergencies during their old age. With the revelation that Emily had used George's retirement savings for the trip and her fan activities, George was furious. The couple had already been on bad terms because Emily refused to return to their home, but this was the last straw. Naturally, this led to a huge fight, and they eventually divorced. Moreover, since the in-laws' house originally belonged to George's family, Emily was kicked out. Emily probably wanted to rely on us, but Ryan preemptively declared that we wouldn't take care of her. Having had such a dramatic confrontation with me, Emily accepted that she wouldn't be forgiven and didn't seek our help. In the end, she moved in with her estranged sister, but rumors say her nieces aren't thrilled about it. Meanwhile, our home is livelier than ever with Carol now in elementary school. Recently, Carol learned how to make sandwiches at a school event and insists on making them for us every day, so our dinners have been all sandwiches. Well, someday, Carol will make the best sandwiches for someone special. For now, we'll just be her practice testers. Ryan had a hard time getting recognized after switching jobs. But finally, last year, the company revised its evaluation system and he got promoted. Working at an old-fashioned company meant the evaluation system wasn't always fair. I hope times continue to improve and life gets easier. Thanks to his promotion, our lives have become a bit more comfortable. With rising costs, we can't say we're living extravagantly, but with Ryan, Carol, and all of us sharing meals together, it's a happy life. Happiness depends on what you make of it. Thankfully, my job remains enjoyable, and except for my weight, there are no health concerns. When Carol said, "I want to take care of a rescue cat," we went to a cat adoption event, and our family grew. Now, it's the three of us and 3 cats. How could this not be a happy life? I think we're living happier days than anyone else. Because we're going to live with my parents. If you oppose, we are getting divorced. Out of the blue, my husband Matthew said this to me. What do you mean by that? Just as I said. I'll use that $3 million as I please. I've decided to use that money to build a duplex. That's all there is to it. I was shocked at how Matthew could so nonchalantly plan to use the $3 million I inherited from Mom, as if it was his right. Construction starts next month, and once it's finished, we'll move. Make sure you're ready. In the meantime, my parents will stay here, so entertain them properly. If you can't, it's divorce. Matthew stated this bluntly, then slammed a signed divorce application on the table. Remember, I'm the head of this household, meaning I'm the most important. I'll say it again, if you can't follow what I say, divorce. I tried to judge whether Matthew was sane by looking at his face. Fine, but you'll regret it. Shut up! Matthew must have thought I would give in as usual. He left the house through the front door, full of confidence. Of course, I didn't follow him. 3 days later. My name is Sophia. 40 years old. I work as a freelance writer. I met Matthew at work when I was still working at a publishing company. Back then, I was 27 and Matthew was 29. We started dating and quickly began to think about marriage. 6 months later, we were married and living together. Soon after, we had children. I quit my job due to my pregnancy. I took a break from work to raise our kids, and once things settled down, I resumed working as a freelance writer. We have 2 kids, an 11-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, both of whom are lively and attend elementary school. Working from home most of the time allows me to be there when the kids come home from school, so they don't feel too lonely. Matthew works in sales, often coming home late, but sometimes he spends time with the kids, like taking baths together or going to amusement parks or movies as a family. I'd say we were living a very good rhythm of life. We're currently renting, but once the kids get a bit older, we plan to build a house on a piece of land we like. We've been saving up for it. I was satisfied with our life, but unfortunately, tragedies can strike unexpectedly. My mom suddenly fell ill. By the time it was discovered, it was already too late to do anything but ensure she could live her remaining time as comfortably and painlessly as possible. Though I said I was satisfied with our life, that was in the context of our immediate family of 4. The conversation changes a bit when it comes to my parents. My dad passed away due to illness when I was in high school. Fortunately, we owned our home and Dad's insurance covered the mortgage, and with Mom working, we weren't financially strained. But without any grandparents or close relatives to rely on, it must have been hard and lonely for her, raising me alone. However, I didn't face much financial hardship and was able to go to college. I did contribute to the household finances after getting a job, but I never had to forego anything I wanted and could dedicate myself to my career. When I got married and left home, my in-laws weren't very happy about us living in the same area as my family home. My in-laws are farmers in Matthew's hometown, proud of their work and continuing to farm into their 60s. I respect and admire their dedication, but apart from that, they seem to hold outdated views on gender roles, thinking men should always come first. Matthew moved to the city for university, found a job, and then we met and married. My in-laws weren't pleased with him marrying. Once you're married, you're a wife. Quit your job and help out here, Matthew's father, Thomas, told me even before we got married. And not returning to help on the farm. I have my own career, and there's no work for me if I return. Matthew argued, convincing them to begrudgingly accept our decision to live near my childhood home, though they'd complain to me over the phone occasionally. Well, my parents are making compromises, so please, just tolerate the occasional phone call, Matthew would say, and I thought that was the least I could do. My mom, while happy to have her daughter and son-in-law nearby, was also mindful of the in-laws, so I figured enduring it was my way of respecting both sets of parents. The in-laws have made numerous infuriating comments over the years. When our daughter Madison was born, they said, "Why didn't you have a boy to carry on the family? They won't live with us, can't produce an heir. Why did Matthew choose such a wife?" That was the first thing they said. Without even a congratulations, this was how they spoke. Matthew responded to this by saying, "Those are rural values, just let them say what they want." I was angry, but decided to swallow my words and ignore it, considering we fundamentally disagreed. Then, a year later, when our son John was born. "Well done! Now we can finally accept you as a wife." They were overjoyed and said, "Bring him back for everyone to see." I was surprised. After all, traveling to the in-laws' house requires a plane and bus ride, taking at least 4 hours at the shortest. It's impossible to take a newborn and a 1-year-old that distance. Matthew, praised by the in-laws, seemed to want to show them off, but aren't you worried about your children? It's fine if the in-laws want to meet them here, but it's impossible to take them. If you insist on taking them, then I'll leave this house. After I made my case, he finally gave in. I threatened the in-laws with the possibility of something happening to the heir, and after much complaining, they reluctantly agreed. The phone harassment towards me intensified, but I endured it to protect my children. The in-laws never made the trip here. The reason is the distance. It's an hour's drive to the nearest bus stop from the in-laws' house, then a 2-hour bus ride with several changes to the airport, and another hour by plane. Just the travel time is 4 hours, plus at least another 2 hours for transfers, making it a half-day journey. Even for the sake of the heir, the in-laws, who hardly ever travel, found the distance daunting. I felt bad that they couldn't see their grandchildren often because of the distance, but since they didn't visit, I settled for sending lots of photos and tried to be considerate. The first time we visited the in-laws' house with the kids was when they were old enough for preschool. Matthew arranged his work schedule, choosing a time outside the busy holiday season when we wouldn't have to stand the whole way, and took them to the in-laws' house. The in-laws were very happy, mostly with John, virtually ignoring Madison. This made me uncomfortable, and I preferred not to visit again. Around that time, Matthew's work became busier, making it difficult to take time off, so we haven't visited the in-laws' house since. I was relieved, though I felt guilty for frequently visiting my own parents since they were nearby. But considering their attitude, I convinced myself it was justified. Matthew agreed, so, albeit naively, I let it be. Until this recent incident, I stayed with my mom as much as possible between her diagnosis and passing, making sure the kids spent time with her to avoid regrets. The in-laws complained, "You hardly let us see the grandkids, but your parent gets all the attention." I was shocked at their words. The situations were completely different. My mom was given a limited time to live. We'll be gone soon. And they say this knowing she won't be around much longer. I cried to Matthew. "Maybe because I told them the kids were visiting your mom. Just bear with it." But he only said, I felt desperate with him. Looking back, it was always like this. When it came to the in-laws, him just asked me to bear it. Just be patient. And leave all it to me. Leaving me to deal with everything they said without ever defending me or showing any intention to. I dealt with the in-laws alone, partly because I never had issues with my mom, feeling obligated to handle them by myself. At this moment, I realized that he was that kind of person. Up until now, the trust and affection I had for him seemed to fade away. But, if there was time to be shaken by such things, I'd rather visit Mom as much as possible. With that thought, I pushed through, ignoring whatever the in-laws said. Until the last day with Mom. There were many things on my mind, but I couldn't just cry. People can become strong for those they need to protect. I'm already a mom, I can't just be Mom's daughter. After cleaning up, I came to know something unbelievable. Mom had rented a safety deposit box at the bank. Inside it, unbelievably, were gold bars. There was quite a lot, bought a long time ago. It seems it was purchased with Dad's life insurance money. There were also stocks. When valued at current prices, $3 million. It was more than surprising. And in the safe, there was also a letter written by Mom. It said, since Dad's insurance covered the home loan, and she was working, I wasn't an expensive child to raise. The money saved was turned into gold and stocks for when it might be needed. She wanted it to be effectively used if anything happened to her. That's what it said. Mom's feelings sank deep into my heart, and I cried, holding the letter. It's often said not to disclose the amount of inheritance even between spouses, but I couldn't keep silent about this amount and told Matthew.
$3 million?
Matthew lost his words. I too was at a loss for words, and we sat in silence for a while.
What do you plan to do with that 3M?
Matthew was the first to break the silence.
What do I plan?
I was at a loss too. For now, I plan to not touch it until the inheritance is settled. I'm the only heir, so I don't see any problem.
That makes sense,
Matthew said, looking up as if calculating something.
Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know.
I left the room, looking at Matthew who wasn't looking back. And so, I completed the inheritance process, and the $3 million worth of assets became mine. As soon as that happened,
We're going to live with my parents. If you object, we're getting a divorce.
out of nowhere, Matthew said this to me.
What do you mean by that?
Just what I said. I'm going to use that $3 million as I please. I've decided to build a duplex with that money. That's all. He said it as if it were the most natural thing, and I was shocked.
Hey, what's the idea here?
What do you mean? Don't you have a clue?
I don't understand.
I truly didn't. How did it come to this all of a sudden?
You lack not only clues but also compassion,
Matthew said, sighing.
Think about how you've been treating my parents all this time. Treatment?
I didn't understand. Honestly, there were plenty of things they had done, but hardly anything I had done to them.
You always took care of your own mom, but neglected my parents, claiming they were too far to visit except for once.
Huh? Suddenly, I felt a shock as if my head had been hit.
Even though I often go to my parents to see my grandchildren, I only went to see my parents once because it was far away.
Wasn't that something we agreed upon?
You wouldn't invite my parents here either.
No, I had asked them to come many times, but the in-laws said it was too far and didn't come. Even for the wedding, despite it having Matthew's work colleagues, they said it was too far and didn't want to come, so we decided to have it in both the land where in-laws' house was and here.
Anyway, I've made my parents endure a lot until now. I think it's okay to use that money for a bit of filial piety.
Was this the kind of person he was? I had always thought of him as a normal husband, a normal dad. As I stood there dumbfounded, he continued with his story.
I've always been dissatisfied with your attitude towards my parents. But there's no work back in our hometown, so I had no choice but to put up with it. Watching you prioritize only your parents, I've always wanted to do filial piety too. But I'm an adult. I kept silent so as not to upset you and disrupt our life.
Huh? I silently said that in my mind. I decided to listen to all of his reasons, considering that I'm an adult too.
But if there's such a large sum involved, that changes things. There's no need to strain myself with a tough sales job here. I'll quit my job and return to my hometown. I'll build a duplex there and start showing filial piety from now on.
At that moment, when I had talked about Mom's inheritance, was he looking up at the sky, thinking about all this? To think he was making such calculations in his head. Matthew, looking me straight in the eyes, declared,
Construction will start next month, and once it's finished, prepare for the move. In the meantime, call my parents here and entertain them properly. If you say you can't, it's divorce.
After saying this, Matthew slammed a divorce application filled out on his part on the table.
Remember, I'm the head of this household, which means I'm the boss. I'll say it again, if you can't follow my orders, it's divorce.
I tried to gauge if he was sane by looking at his face. Matthew's eyes were bloodshot. One could say he was insane, or one could argue he was sane. What's clear is that he's blinded by the sum of $3 million. It's as if I could see stacks of cash in the depths of his pupils. No way. I said it firmly.
What did you say? I refuse to live with your parents. And I refuse to move to your hometown. I won't make the kids change schools, and at this point, I can't welcome your parents either. Then it's divorce,
Matthew said, glaring at me.
Fine, let's divorce. But just so you know, you'll regret it. Shut up!
Matthew left the house and didn't return. 3 days later.
Hey, what's going on?
Matthew, who hadn't contacted me since leaving, suddenly made such a call. What do you mean?
The gold bars and stocks. The safety deposit box is empty.
Of course, it's about that. What do you mean?
I moved them elsewhere, so it's not surprising they're gone. Why did you do such a thing without telling me? Without telling? It's the inheritance I received. I'm free to do what I want with it, right? I said I would use it as I see fit.
He's free to say so. But I never agreed to that.
Where did you hide it?
I didn't hide it.
I entrusted it to a lawyer. What?
I sighed. Then kindly explained.
There's something called inheritance tax when you inherit something. If you inherit $3 million, who knows how much tax will be charged? So, I entrusted it to a lawyer to sell only as much as necessary to pay the taxes.
A reasonable measure, obviously.
That's why I requested it during the inheritance proceedings, didn't I? Get it back immediately and give me the money from the sale.
Why should I do such a thing for you, a stranger now?
Eh?
He seemed not to understand what I meant.
I'll say it again. Why should I do such a thing for you, who are now a stranger? What do you mean, stranger? We're husband and wife.
Well, we were, until 3 days ago.
3 days ago?
I sighed again and decided to kindly explain once more.
You left the divorce application you signed, remember? I immediately submitted it to the office after you left.
So, you and I are strangers now.
Why would you do such a thing? That's something you decided to write and submit yourself, right? That was obviously a strategy to make you agree to the inheritance.
I was astonished. He said it as if it were the most natural thing.
Anyway, I've already submitted the divorce application, so you and I are strangers now. Even if we were still married, you would have no rights anyway. Hey, we're still married! Don't be so cold.
His voice was almost crying.
That's why, we're not married anymore. Oh, and by the way, I didn't realize until you called, but you took the safety deposit box key without telling me.
He didn't answer.
Since the box is empty, I was thinking of canceling it anyway, so I didn't even notice the key was gone. If you were planning to take the contents without telling me, that's theft, you know. You're calling your husband a thief? That's why I'm saying you're not a husband anymore. But when you stole the key, we were still married. I'll have to consult with a lawyer about what that means.
When I said this, he started ranting something incomprehensible over the phone.
I don't understand what you're saying, so I'm hanging up now.
But I quickly hung up and blocked his number, saying. That night, a call came from the in-laws. I had forgotten to block their number after blocking Matthew's. The in-laws had this to say.
The house has already been demolished for rebuilding, and now you're saying to stop the reconstruction? Do you think that's going to fly? We've already hired the master builder, and it's too late to cancel now. He's already told everyone about the $3 million job with great joy. Bring the money immediately. If you apologize now, we'll still recognize you as his wife.
Not wanting to engage further, I decided to let the in-laws rant until they were tired. It seems Matthew had already proceeded with the rebuilding arrangements at the in-laws' house while I was processing the inheritance. Probably, he thought that if he created a fait accompli, I would just comply as usual if he told me to bear with it. From the in-laws' call, it appears that the oldest annex of the in-laws' house had already been demolished.
The main house is now full of stuff from the annex. What are you going to do?
Come and help clean up immediately. But that wasn't something I asked for.
Are you done saying what you want to say? Then, I have just one thing to tell you. My divorce with him is finalized. Therefore, you and I are now strangers. Goodbye.
This time, I made sure to block the in-laws' number as well. I rejected all calls from Matthew and the in-laws and took the children to a different location for safety. As expected, he and the in-laws made a big fuss at our house, not finding me and the children there, and apparently reported us as missing persons to the police. However, I had already asked my lawyer to handle these matters in advance. The lawyer had informed the police that my divorce with him was finalized, that the safety deposit box key was stolen, and provided the recorded phone calls with Matthew and the in-laws, explaining that I had to hide for my safety. Desperate, Matthew and the in-laws begged the lawyer to pass a letter to me, and when they contacted me about what to do, I asked it to be forwarded. The letter stated,
"The master builder is waiting a bit, and the demolition has stopped with just the annex, but he keeps asking when to resume, and it's troubling. I had completely forgotten about the inheritance tax. I want to downsize the reconstruction to fit the remaining budget after paying the taxes, and I would like to consult as soon as possible. You're the only grandparents the children have now that mom has passed away. I don't want them to be without grandparents. You should make amends for the past by showing filial piety to my parents. Living together will quickly bring out familial love."
Such slippery words were listed.
Do you misunderstand that a woman can't remarry unless half a year has passed? There's no such need when a couple remarries. Come back now and let's re-register our marriage.
And even more astonishing claims were made, like, of course, I refused all of Matthew's letters through the lawyer and warned that any further involvement would be cut off.
No!
And if he continued to harass me, he would be reported to the police as a stalker. According to the lawyer, he had actually proceeded with resignation formalities. He hurriedly appealed to HR to retract it, but the company, already considering layoffs, refused to acknowledge it. Matthew, receiving his severance pay, reluctantly returned to his hometown. He used the money to pay for the demolition and asked the master builder to cancel the reconstruction. Somehow, the work was settled to mutual satisfaction, but he completely lost his credit in his hometown and was living narrowly in the old in-laws' house with his parents. To ensure Matthew and the in-laws wouldn't find me, I bravely moved to a distant location. My job can be done from home, so moving hasn't caused any trouble. It's really a good time for that. I explained to the children that Dad was away on work, and they surprisingly accepted it smoothly. I thought our family relationship wasn't bad, but it seems the children's relationship with him wasn't very good either. Now that I think about it, he only interacted with them when he felt like it. He appeared to listen to me but actually didn't, saying, "Please bear with it." Maybe he had only that much involvement with the children as well. The inheritance will be carefully saved for the children's future. That money is for emergencies. And to ensure there are no such emergencies, just as my mom raised me solidly, I plan to live a stable life so my children grow up to be well-grounded individuals.